we become slaves to what we love most. So that's why we have to be very careful what we love most. If what we love more than anything else, if what we love more than what society thinks, what money comes or what money goes, if what we love more than any of these other things is Allah, then when Allah says, we hear and we obey. When Allah says that you're supposed to dress in a certain way, we hear and we obey, and we do it out of love. When Allah says to do a certain thing, when Allah says that at Fajr time, it's you get up and you pray, we hear and we obey. Because let me give you guys an example. If I told you that at exactly 5 a.m. there would be a check outside of your doorstep for $5 million, 5 a.m. and all you have to do is set your alarm, go inside, would you set your alarm? Is there anyone in this room who would say, I love sleep more? Is there anyone in this room who would say that my bed is too comfortable, forget the $5 million? Raise your hand if you would do that. And if you raise your hand, I know you're not telling the truth. Okay, you know you would do that. Something to reflect on is that we will set our alarm and we will get up any time of the night. No matter how little sleep you got, no matter how comfortable your bed is, you will get up just to go get that money. Now that's $5 million, because that's a lot of money, right? Do you know that that is nothing compared to infinity, right? We all know that. I mean, you don't need to be like a math major to know that, because it's a finite amount of money. It's a finite reward. You cannot compare a finite reward to an infinite reward. Because when you compare something finite to something infinite, no matter how big it is, it tends towards zero. It's essentially nothing. So now we're talking about things that we would do. We would do it for way less. If I told you $10 were going to be outside your door, you know what I'm saying? You're like, oh, who cares? All you got to do is get out of bed. Easy money, right? You would do it. You would do it for $2. I mean, we would. Admit it. I'll give you proof. I will give you proof. You want me to give you proof? Okay, I'm going to give you proof. Black Friday. Right? Totally, we do that. I mean, this isn't just theoretical. People, do they not? They will wake up at the crack of dawn after Thanksgiving sales. Wake up at the crack of dawn and stand outside of Best Buy and stand outside of Walmart or wherever it is, and sometimes literally stand in lines for hours in the cold to save a few dollars, right? I mean, really, to save a few dollars. So we're not talking 5 million. We're talking like $5. Sometimes, like, even if it's $50. So forget 5 million. The most, what are you gonna save? But this is what we do. Something to look at. This is just because of money. But we won't get up and at that same time of the night, or that same time to pray Qiyam, or to pray even Fajr. We'll sleep through Fajr, but if it comes to a sale, we'll get up. Sometimes people camp outside. I mean, do you guys know what people do for these sales? Have you guys seen or read in the news about the way we act? I mean, this one time, this lady, I guess she had mace, and she was like spraying people at Walmart because she wanted the video games. I mean, really? It's just a few dollars. But that's the point. This is how we act when we love something. When we love, this is how we act. Human beings will act absolutely insane when they love. And when the love is for money and when the love is for getting a good deal, we'll do anything. But if that is for something so much greater, we don't even want to make a tiny effort of getting up and praying Fajr. We will not step out of our class to go pray. We won't step out of a meeting. We won't step out of the Macy's sale. We won't step away from a movie or a basketball game to go pray. But let me ask you this question. When you guys are in class, or you're at work, or you're in a meeting, and you need to use the bathroom, what do? I mean, this is a rhetorical question, but I know the answer. The answer is, I don't care what situation I'm in. If I need to use the bathroom, I go, I leave, and I use the bathroom. Nobody says, but I'm in class, so I can't leave. Why? Why don't we do that? Why do we say, I'm not going to get up and go to the bathroom during my class? Why do we not say that? The reason is that the consequences of not getting up and leaving the classroom far outweigh any consequences of the embarrassment of walking out of class. Right? Agreed? When it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you need to use the bathroom, has anyone said, you know, I'm just too comfortable, I'm just going to take care of my business here because I'm just too comfortable? Yeah, you did that when you were like 5. But since then, hopefully you didn't do that. So you will get up, and I will get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the bathroom, but we won't get up to pray. So far, this is our human condition. We will get up to use the bathroom. We will get up to go stand in line for a sale, but we won't get up to pray to the Lord of the universe, who has the entire universe in His control. We're not talking now about $5 million. We're not talking about any amount, any finite amount of reward. We're talking about forever. We're talking about the reward of God. We're talking about Jannah. So we have to go back and re-examine our priorities. If we can leave our classroom, if we can leave our meeting, if we can leave these other things that we're doing in life to go to the bathroom, can we not leave to pray? We are so worried about being embarrassed in front of people. Isn't that why we get up? Isn't that the reason why you don't want to just stay in class and take care of your business in your seat? Is because you're afraid of being humiliated in front of the people. But we're not worried about being humiliated in front of Allah by missing our prayers. Isn't this the reality? The reason for this is because we have taken the dunya, we've taken everything that we can see and feel and touch, we've taken this life and we've injected it into our hearts, and we love it so much that we love it more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't see Allah, so we run after what we can see. We have to shift that focus. Because dunya is something that is by its very nature temporary, by its very nature an illusion. Everything we run after in this life Does any of it last? Tell me the answer to the questions that I asked you at the beginning. Remember I asked 5 questions or so? Now, the answer that you had to those questions, do you remember what it was? Yes? Nod if you do. Okay. That thing, the answer, is that thing gonna last? Is that thing gonna last forever? Is that thing perfect? So this is our problem. We try to fill the emptiness with something that is not lasting and something that is not perfect. And then we wonder why we end up with broken hearts. We end up disappointed. We end up so upset, so afraid, so insecure. It's clear why that happens. Because the thing that we are loving most is something that is not lasting, something that is not perfect. It's like a person who's rock climbing and they're holding onto a twig. What happens? You don't have to be a physics major to know what happens. What happens? The twig, if you hold onto a twig with all of your weight, what happens to the twig? It breaks. Then what happens to you? There's something called gravity. What happens to you? You fall. And we wonder why we end up falling, and we keep falling, and things keep breaking. It's because we're holding on to the wrong stuff. We are loving the wrong stuff, and we are neglecting the real thing. How do we find a balance? And that's inshallah where we'll end. How do we find a balance? Because we live in dunya, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never told us that we should not love the creation. Allah did not say that you cannot love your children, your spouse, your money, you know, these nice halal things that you have. It's okay to love those things. How do we find a balance where those things are loved but they do not own us? How do we find a balance so that our greatest love, أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. You know, in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us. قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ. Say if your fathers, your sons, your spouses. Now here in this ayah, Allah lists about 8 things. And by the way, all of these things are halal. All of them are halal. Is it halal to love your parents? Is it halal to love your children? Is it halal to love your spouse? Is it halal to love your relatives? Is it halal to love your halal business or your home? However, Allah warns us of something in this ayah. He says that if any of these things are more beloved to you than Allah and His Messenger and striving in His cause, then wait until Allah brings about His decision. And Allah does not guide the defiantly disobedient ones. Now there's a message in this ayah that a lot of us don't realize. And that is that the things that distract us from God are not always necessarily the haram things. The clubbing, the drinking, the drugs, the alcohol. No. Sometimes they are the halal things. Sometimes they are the halal things that we take and we love as we should only love Allah. And that's the secret that a lot of us didn't learn. We don't realize what's the problem. I'm a mother, I love my children. So what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that when I love my children and they overtake and they become my center instead of Allah, that's a problem. Even though of course it's halal to love my children. My spouse, when I take my spouse, it's not a boyfriend, it's not a girlfriend, I'm married, right? You take your spouse and you put them at the center of your existence, and your life starts to revolve around them, and what you think about most is them, and what you want to please most is them, and what you fear most is them, and all of a sudden, where is Allah in the equation? That's the problem. And this will happen with halal money, this will happen with your spouse, this will happen with your children, with your parents, with your business, with your house, which you delight in, the ayah says. But when those things you start to focus on and revolve your life around, that's when you have a problem. Even though they're all halal. The question remains, how do we find a balance? Because it's natural for a mother to love her children. It's natural for a spouse to love their spouse. It's natural to love these things. Now the question is how? And this is where I want to bring in a concept which is mentioned in the book. It's a concept of what we hold in our heart and what we hold in our hand. And there's a difference between holding something in the hand and holding something in the heart. This is conceptual. But what it's talking about is this. Whatever we hold in our heart is a serious attachment. It's something I'm dependent on. What I hold in my heart is the thing I revolve my life around. It's the first thing on my mind when I wake up, the last thing on my mind before I sleep, what I think about all day, what I'm most afraid of, what I'm most interested in pleasing. It becomes the center of my world. It's the answer to those 5 questions that I gave you. That's what's in my heart. And that thing will become my master. You know that this is actually the reason why, you know, this whole, what do you want to call it? Mother-in-law phenomenon of, right, you hear the word mother-in-law and all of a sudden there's this automatic connotation, right, of someone who doesn't want to let go of her son, right? Why do you think that happens? Think about it. Why do you think that happens? And I'm not talking about a mother loving her son. I'm talking about the unhealthy attachment of a mother to her son to such an extent that when he gets married, she is not able to let go. It's to such an extent that it creates problems between the husband and the wife. To such an extent that the son has to choose between his wife and his mother. That should never happen. To such an extent that he has to constantly tell his mother that I love you more than my wife. That's not healthy. Why do you think that happens? Do you know why that happens? That happens because the mother took that child and for his entire life, he was at her center. He was at her center. She may have believed in Allah, but he was at her center. Her child was at her center. Now if you take your child, your son in this case, and you did tawaf around him your entire life, you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, he didn't have to do anything for himself. Like, you did everything for him. You fed him to his mouth till he's like 20 something, right? You do everything for him. He never lifts a finger because your life revolves around him. First of all, you're harming your child when you're treating them in that way. That's not love, by the way. That's not love. That's insecure attachment, that's dependency, and it's not healthy. Allah is supposed to be at the center, not your child, not your spouse. So what happens then when he grows up and he gets married, you have an unhealthy consequence. And it's because an unhealthy attachment brings about unhealthy consequences in our personal lives, in our collective lives, and in the society. And this is just one example. This is the reason why someone who, when they lose stock or the stock market crashes, they take a pistol to the head. Why does that happen? Why does that unhealthy consequence happen? It's because that person took their stocks, took their money and put it at the center of their life and revolved around it. Why does Romeo want to kill himself or Juliet want to kill herself when they don't have the other person or they think the other person is gone? It's because Romeo took Juliet and put her at the center, and Juliet took Romeo and put him at the center. That's not love, that's worship. That's not love, that's worship. And that's what we have to understand. That proper love, that healthy love, is never to take something other than Allah and put it at your center. It's to love in a healthy way. And to love in a healthy way means that you love without attachment and without dependency. By the way, this is very difficult. This is very difficult sometimes. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes trains us to do. You know, one of the ways in which Allah trains us to do this is actually through the concept of pain. Think about a person who's standing in the kitchen and you accidentally touch the stove with your arm, but you don't see it, right? It's the back of your arm, and you touch the stove. What makes you move your hand? It's the pain, right? So what has Allah designed the pain to do for you? The pain is an indicator that you need to make a change. So in this case, the pain of being burned is an indicator that you need to move your arm, right? Do you know that emotional pain is very similar? When you take your child, when you take your money, when you take anything else and you put it in the heart in a place that only God should be, guess what happens? It hurts you. And that very thing that you took and you replaced Allah with, that thing will become the source of your greatest pain. Allah has done that. Allah has given us this mechanism as a mercy to tell you that you need to make a change. There's a problem. You know, when you have those very painful relationships, and it keeps hurting you and it keeps hurting you until what happens? You make a change. And that's the point, that it will hurt you because it's not healthy. The pain, the anxiety are all signs that there needs to be a change made inside in your attachment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directs us. One of the easiest ways to break our false attachments is to find something better to love. I'm going to use this example. It's an example I use in the book as well, because I think it illustrates this concept. If you think about a child, and you know when a child falls in love with a toy, I mean, they just become consumed. So imagine a child who falls in love with a toy car. He's walking by the toy store and sees the toy car in the window. Now that child, if he gets his hands on that toy car, good luck taking it away. He will not want to do anything else, just play with the car. Maybe to the point that he doesn't want to eat, sleep, go to school. I just want to play with this toy. But my question to you is, what happens when that child grows up and now sees a real car? What happens to his attachment to the toy car? What happens? Not a big deal anymore. That's just a toy. I see the real Ferrari now. What does this have to do with us? There is a toy, there is a lesser model, and there is the real thing. The lesser life is this life. Think of this life as that toy car. In every way, it is inferior to Jannah. In every way. It is inferior in quality, because this life, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much status you have, no matter how much approval you have, it will never be perfect. Will it? No matter how beautiful you are, what happens after 50 years? It will never be perfect. This life is inferior to Jannah in quantity. No matter how much you have, it will not last forever. All those people that are on the magazine covers, they might have more money than you, they might have more fame than you, but they're gonna die too. And they don't look like that forever. You can do all the plastic surgery in the world, but you just can't look like that forever. Right? And that's very hard for some people to accept because they're so attached to this life. But we have something better. Jannah is the real thing, right? You have the toy car and you have the real car. Now what I'm suggesting to you is the more that you can see the real thing, the less your attachment will be to the false model. So when you compare Jannah to dunya, there's no comparison. And when you compare Allah, when you compare the Creator to the creation, there is no comparison. The more you can see the real thing, the weaker your attachment becomes to the false model. Does that make sense? So my advice to you and to myself is the advice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Increase in your dhikr. Increase in your remembrance of the real thing. And when you increase in your remembrance of the real thing, then the false, lesser model becomes just, it takes its proper place. It's no longer the center. It's just the toy. Meaning that it is what it is. Yes, you interact with it, but it is not your ultimate goal anymore. You're no longer in love with it. It goes in the hand, no longer in the heart. It goes in the hand. Yes, you interact, but you know that there's something so much better. And it is only when you don't see the real car that you're so in love with the toy car. That kid is so attached to his toy only because he never saw the real thing. And we become so attached to the creation only because we don't know the Creator. We only know of Allah conceptually, like, yeah, Allah exists. But do you really know Allah? Do you really have that relationship and see Allah working in your life? Probably not. And the more that you do, the more that it becomes easy to refocus the heart. Because you have fallen in love with something better. You know how they say if you want to get over someone, you just find someone better to replace them, right? If we want to get over our love for this life, we need to fall in love with something better. And Allah has given us something so much better. Allah has given us Himself. But we just don't know Allah. We don't remember Allah. We don't think about Allah. We don't talk to Allah. Even if we're praying, we're thinking about the toy car, aren't we? Remember I asked you, what do you think about in your prayers? Maybe it's your exam or somebody in your life or whatever it is. It's still that toy car. We have not seen the real thing yet. And the way to do that is we have to increase in your remembrance of the real thing. That means dhikr. Dhikr, the reading the Quran and reflecting on it. Making sure that you are praying 5 times a day on time. Making dua, speaking to Allah. If you have a best friend and you never communicate, how strong is your relationship going to be? You know you're always talking to your best friend by some technical device or another, right? Text, Facebook, phone, whatever, but you're constantly communicating, at least if you're a girl. You're communicating with those people, and that's how you build that strong relationship. What if during that communication you're speaking in a language you don't understand? Does anyone in this room speak Chinese? So no one in this room speaks Chinese. Okay, cool. What if every conversation you have with your best friend is in Chinese? And you have no idea what you're saying? How strong is your relationship going to be? Now, when you're praying and you're talking to God, and you have absolutely no idea what you're saying, how strong is that relationship going to be? Does that make sense? Simple enough. We don't know what we're saying to Him, so how can we expect to build that relationship? We need to understand at least the basics of our prayer, of what we're saying. Finally, I'll tell you that the more you remember God outside of your prayers, the easier it will be to remember God inside of your prayers. So we have to work on remembering God more, just in general. And the more we remember Allah, the more we are feeding the heart. Think of dhikr, the remembrance of God, as air. Air that you breathe, but it's air that your heart is breathing. And it keeps the heart alive. And the moment you cut off air, what happens to the body? It suffocates and it dies. And the same thing happens to the heart. When the heart is not filled with the remembrance of God, then you're suffocating the heart. And that's why the heart becomes hardened and eventually it dies. You know, sometimes I think, sometimes what keeps us from being consistent in our relationship with God is that we sometimes fall and we feel hopeless, we mess up, we feel like, you know what, it's just too hard, I'm too far away, there's no point. But the way we have to think about it is this: our prayers, you know, sometimes people don't pray because they feel like, well, I'm just really low right now, I'm not in a good place. When I get to a good place, I'll pray again. Do you know what that person is like? It's like a person who says, I'm not feeling very good today, so I'm not going to breathe today, because I'm not feeling good. And when I feel better, I'll breathe. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. What's the problem with this scenario? What's the problem with this scenario? You're not going to feel better if you don't breathe. In fact, you're going to die. You have to think of your prayers in exactly the same way. They are the air of your heart. And even if you're not feeling good or you're feeling really low, you still need to breathe. Just think of it like that. I'm going to go take a breath right now. I'm going to go pray, I'm going to go take a breath right now. And eventually, if you keep breathing or keep praying, you eventually will feel better. Remember, this life isn't linear.